also have cross mod, which basically what happens is one audio rate oscillator modulates the other audio rate oscillator. So it's just like a modulation source. It's just like an LFO, except for it's not going at a low frequency. It's going at a high frequency. So it's kind of an HFO effect. And see, in moderation, it adds a little bit of chorusing and depth to the sound. It makes it rich. Gosh, that's so crunchy and rich. And then as you push it up, it starts to affect the tuning of the oscillators. But you can actually fix that because you have the ability to change the pitch. So what you get is a even further complex waveform that has a modulation extent in it that gives it a richness. Like you needed more richness. There's already so much richness going on here. And of course, the frequency of the oscillator does affect how it modulates the other oscillator. And you get into this, almost immediately get into this like sort of digital level of waveform complexity. And some of these sounds sometimes like kind of remind me of like DX7 sounds, which I think is really novel because you can have, you know, the straight waveforms and then you could go right into a sort of digital complexity, which is really, I mean, that's just a wider palette for you to use. Okay, there's some weird tuning going on in there, but my gosh, listen to that sound. When do you get something like that out of an analog synthesizer? It's really, really crazy. Okay. And yeah, you can also use this pitch for detuning, which I didn't do. Which is nice. Okay, next we have something that I think, you know, a lot of polyphonic analog synthesizers of the past did not have this opportunity. And I think you're really missing out if you don't have the ability to direct an envelope generator to one of your oscillators. And this envelope generator, by turning this knob, you'll get a positive envelope in one direction and a negative envelope in the other direction. But it allows you to have one oscillator kind of doing its own thing, which can make for some really interesting sounds, even in the settings we have it in right now. And you can use it to create these interesting transients at the beginning of sounds. That is awesome. Every analog polyphonic synth should be able to do that. And then you could, you know, also change the volume so it's not so obvious. The thing I was just doing where I was changing the decay on the EG, we'll find out later that we can actually do that with this controller while we're playing. We don't have to actually change the knobs, which is super cool in itself. But you can tell, I mean, that sound may not be exactly the sound that you would use. It's really a fun effect. And you can hear the negative a lot better when with this than you can with other settings. That's really fun. Okay, but this particular knob has the benefits I just showed you, but it really comes into use when we're using, for example, a sync. Now, I've used a lot of different syncs over time. Yeah, okay. Let's all get a chuckle out about, the double meaning. Anyway, I've used a lot of synthesizer sync before, and this is an example of some super easy sync because all you have to do is flick it on. You don't have to decide where it's routed or what's affecting what. And right now, you may be saying, well, Mark, I don't hear anything. Well, that's because, as we know, what sync does is it forces one oscillator to reset its wave shape according to the resetting of another oscillator that's happening naturally. And if they're both in tune, then you're really not going to hear the effect. But as we start to change their tuning, you can hear the effect. And if you wanted a static sync effect, all you have to do is change the pitch of VCO2. And you get this really bright, interesting sound. And by changing the wave shape, you can get different sounds. So then you have, for example, a triangle resetting its cycle at the wavelength of a sawtooth wave. So you get really interesting effects. Also, the effect that I'm currently doing by turning the pitch knob, we can also assign to this lever. Or the shape or anything you can assign to this lever. So you can get these rich sounds that I'm getting by turning the knobs. But that's a really cool sync sound, but it's not the sync sound we're most commonly used to, which would be something where we brought in the pitch envelope. So you have more than the car's sound, if I may call it that, to mess around with sync, and that's a really nice another timbral bonus. Like we don't have enough incredibly complex and interesting waveforms to choose from. Now we have even more. That's the filter envelope negative. Here, look at the wave shape. Isn't it cool when cool sounding sounds also look cool? So fun. Okay, so we're all just right in the oscillator here, and there are synthesizers that interesting things don't start happening until you start modulating the filter or etc. But with this one, all of the interesting stuff that happens pretty much happens in the oscillators. And that's amazing. What an amazing application of a few functions. And I know a lot of people looked at the synthesizer and said, yeah, everything looks pretty standard. I can't see why I'd want one. But wow, this is not only, these are some interesting implementations of common functions and really audibly pleasing applications of these functions. And then we have ring modulation, as if we don't have enough. Ring modulation is the sum of two waveforms, the sum and differences of two different waveforms input. So, if they're at the same pitch, you're not going to hear much of an effect. There's a little bit of change. It's when pitches are changed and wave shapes are changed that you start to get interesting effects. And of course, we can automate that pitch change by using the this envelope control. By turning down oscillator 1, we can hear just the effect. Wow. Then, of course, it's polyphonic. If you, as that effect is happening, as you modulate various functions, you're going to get various sounds. Again, like for example, if you would had that shape directed to the slider here, we'd be able to be modulating that sound as the pitch was modulated by the envelope while the ring modulator effect was happening. And by changing the envelope, you get different effects. So it's not all Doctor Who with the ring modulator. You can get some functional, like pleasing, well, not that those sounds aren't pleasing, but you know what I mean. It's not just all noise. I've not really heard a polyphonic analog that sounded like this. And it leads to a certain organic nature because you have all of these, you know, complex waveform modulations happening. And you could turn on the cross mod along with it. What the heck? If I played that sound for you and said, 4-voice analog polyphonic, you'd be like, what? Or I would. So weird. And of course you can have the sync and the ring on at the same time. Okay, now this is the point where I'll probably offend someone, but you can't do this with a Juno 6, my friends. You know, okay, so you want a pad. You can make a pad that changes greatly over time because that's just using this envelope generator to affect these effects. This isn't what we could also apply the LFO to all of this, which we'll get to, and get sounds that are complex waveforms that change massively over time in beautiful ways. Amazing. I just want to sort of jump for joy when I hear this because it's so different than anything I'm accustomed to coming from an analog synthesizer. Especially one that is this inexpensive. Unbelievable. All right. Let's also not forget that we have access to noise. Which we will use creatively as we explore later functions in the synthesizer. But that is just scratching the surface of the oscillator section.